This is Help, I'm a Contractor podcast. Hi, I'm Seth Lewis. I am a blue-collar business coach. Finally, someone that understands what contractors actually go through. My goal and vision is to connect business owners with knowledge while tackling some of the industry's toughest challenges. Please subscribe to my content and let's support each other to create awareness for our industry. Check out what I have going on at www.bluecollarbusinesscoach.net. Check out my book that has helped business owners across the country change their business and their life. But for now, it's time for the show. Let's get it. Today on the show, I have Lori Tschohl, and I am so excited, and you are going to be inspired by her story. She's been a business owner of a variety of different businesses, and now is the owner of Pipe Mechanical. So we're going to dive right into it. Welcome to the show, Lori.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
How's your day so far?
It's been good. It's been a busy Friday.
Yeah, that seems to happen sometimes. So just to start, tell us a little bit where you're located and a little bit about your business, and then we'll start to unpack and go back to your journey and unpack that little by little.
Okay, sounds good. So I am located on the Olympic Peninsula outside of Seattle, and it's called Kitsap County, and I also operate up in Jefferson County. So we have logistically, we're in this gorgeous, beautiful area, and sometimes we can be pretty remote. So I operate out of two locations on the Olympic Peninsula. It's called Port Ludlow and Paulsville. And so we have just moved into our second location. Actually, it's our third location, but second on the peninsula. So we're trying to kind of get our office up and running and our warehouse organized. And then I also do some work in the Seattle area. So we have what I would consider a satellite office over there, a lot of deliveries, equipment, things like that. We work a huge area. So in addition to doing HVAC service, maintenance, and installation, we also have a whole division of my company that we do gas piping, commercial and residential. So we're kind of all over the state. And in Oregon, we're working currently down there now.
That's exciting. How did you get into this?
So I like to say it's been kind of a unique journey. My entire career has really been with McDonald's. And I've been known as like, oh, you're that McDonald's person. I'm like, yes, that's how I started. So I started at a very young age working at McDonald's and ended up becoming a franchisee, going that whole path of in the restaurants, working for corporate, doing a variety of different things. And then I was actually able to purchase my first McDonald's way back in 1997. That was my first store. And it was, they call them co-branded. So it was like in a Chevron gas station, half was a gas station, half was a McDonald's. And I was in remote Eastern Washington. So I was so fortunate enough to make enough money that I could purchase 6 in New York. And so I moved to Buffalo, New York. So I moved from the Seattle area and Eastern Washington to Buffalo, New York, where most people like, why did you do that? And I said it was for opportunity. I ended up not only purchasing a large travel plaza on the New York State Thruway, and that really educated me not just in the restaurant business, but in special venues, and doing business in New York has been quite the challenge. So that's kind of how I started my career. And after 30 plus years with McDonald's in all different aspects, from hi, welcome to McDonald's, can I take your order please at the front counter, up to creating a $10 million organization that I owned and was sole owner of, I then retired and said, oh, you know what? I love McDonald's. I love the people. I was working in some areas in Buffalo, and unfortunately, if you've seen the news, They've had, some tragedy there. My office and one of my restaurants would literally been right down the street from there.
Wow.
So I worked in what we would call empowerment zones and very inner city. And so at some point I said, you know what, it's time for me to get back to the West Coast. I love the West Coast. I said, it's time to get back. So I sold all those McDonald's and I retired. And I was like, oh, what should I do with my life? And I love to travel. That is one of my passions. And I've been to all 7 continents. I've been all over the world. And part of what I did in Buffalo, because I had such a large travel plaza, I had to do some unique hiring, which was with J1 visa students. So it really combined my passion for travel and expanding my business and mentoring and working with young folks. So I had the pleasure and privilege to travel all over the world to some of the very small countries like Lithuania and interview folks. And they would come back and they would be college students and they would work in my business because we were so busy from May to September that we needed to add an additional probably 50 to 100 staff. So that was kind of a unique twist. And then I also had like these special venues. I worked with like a Lavazza coffee shop and Sandella's, which was like pizza, pasta, panini. So I wasn't just like this McDonald's. I was this entrepreneur that I was developing, like I said, a $10 million company. So I had, sold all this, retired, and I was traveling. And I'm like, oh, I can't afford myself anymore. I wasn't backpacking across Europe. I was like, okay, where's the closest 5-star? That's where Lori is. And if I'm in Tibet, I'm at the Westin. And that's exactly where we stayed. So I was at the point where I said, man, I can't afford myself. I need to do something. So after a year and a half of traveling and unwinding and unpacking all my businesses in New York, I came across Pandora Jewelry. So I was flying in and out of McCarran. I was going to Vegas a lot. My brother was working down there, and my brother's been in this industry for about 43 years. He likes to remind me, I'll say 40 and he's like 43. So he's been in this industry for like 43 years, and he ended up going into a partnership down in Las Vegas. So, big sister, I try to help him out. At the time, he wasn't ready to start his own company. He had owned his own company, ended up, closing it down through different reasons, and ended up being a partner in Las Vegas. So I was going in and out of Las Vegas, and I saw Pandora Jewelry, and I thought, oh, I like jewelry. I've picked up jewelry all over the world, So let me check this out. Then I found out they franchised. I'm like, well, doesn't get any better than that. Beautiful baubles. It should be like a turnkey system. Well, I would like to say that was probably one of my larger business mistakes that I've made in my lifetime. And I, submitted my resume, and of course they looked at my financial status because I had just sold all my McDonald's restaurants, and they're like, oh, great. Can you be on a plane and interview? So I flew to Baltimore. I interviewed. I asked for the West Coast and wanted to work specifically, own these Pandora Jewelry stores in like the Seattle area. And they said, oh, we've just completed a agreement with Ben Bridge Jewelers. And I'm like, oh, okay. And they're like, well, Warren Buffett owns Ben Bridge. So I'm like, well, what's the problem? It's like my little pittance against his. So they had already locked up the market. So I said, well, I'm willing to do business, so I can stay in the West. So left that interview. I think I was it was cab back then. It wasn't Uber yet. And within 10 minutes, they were sending me a message, you're approved. And I'm like, okay, good. So then we started launching this journey in That was about 2012. And I ended up going into Boise, Idaho, and Salt Lake City, just outside of Salt Lake City. So sell all my McDonald's, take a year and a half off, jumped into Pandora. And what I will tell you is that the product is amazing. I think one of the struggles I had, it was a good thing I had a lot of time with business, so I could overcome so many of the things, but it wasn't as turnkey as I thought. There was a lot to it. And the end of the day, it was, man, I've got like $500,000 in inventory, and I'm looking at these beautiful baubles, and it's great, but you know what? I'm not making any money. And it's there in these display cabinets. So I had a release clause, so I was able to have that negotiated when I went into leasing. So that was another part of kind of, it's like an educational journey. You know, you do McDonald's for so long, but now I'm in a different part and I'm doing a lot of retail, which I really didn't know that much about. So now all of a sudden I'm learning about triple net leases, and I'm stuck at, you know, $10,000, $12,000 a month in these beautiful spaces. So I was smart enough to get a clause negotiated in that if I wasn't hitting a certain sales at my 5-year mark, I could go ahead and end that lease early. So I shut down my Boise location in 2017, transferred all the inventory, still kept my Salt Lake. And when it was time that lease ran out, that's when I closed that business down. I didn't sell them, I actually closed them. So while I'm doing all this, I had started Eagle Pipe and Mechanical back in about 2014. So I'm like, okay, HVAC, but I don't know a lot about HVAC. I used to work on a lot of the committees with McDonald's on building and things like that. So I was always familiar with a lot of construction, and I've built McDonald's restaurants. I've built out these Pandora Jewelry stores, but actually the residential side of the business. And so I had been talking to my brother, and I'm like, it's time to get you out of Vegas. You need to come back up. So went ahead and I started this company, but he wasn't quite ready to make the move to come up and work for me. He was my first employee. So I'm 100% woman owned. And even though he has all the experience, he's an employee with me. So finally in 2015, I convinced him. So he came up, and here we are. I'm in Salt Lake City selling a Pandora bracelet, and he's calling, hey, you need to get a permit for me. You know, I need to get a mechanical permit. I'm like, I don't even know how to do this, you know? So my business made that turn when I have a rock star. She's an office manager, comfort advisor, right-hand person. So I hired Alicia Wilson in October of 2015. So June, July, August, September, Mike and I, he's out working, and I'm trying to figure out what this is. So we hire her, and she comes in, and the first thing I tell her is, we need to get educated on this business. I know a lot about business. I can run the business side, but I don't know the day-to-day. And so that's what we started doing. We started taking classes with our distributor. We worked with like BDR. So we did some of the, training classes through them. And I think it was ASHRA, probably not too long after that. And it's now Service Nation Alliance that I have been working with, but it had been Service Roundtable. And, as we're going through the bazillion booths, a woman says to us, hey, would you like to be a part of this? I'm like, well, free membership, gets you every time. Like, okay. So we're like, okay, we sign up, and we're still scrambling, how we're going to make this business work. We've finally hired another technician who is amazing. And, so we've got 2 guys in the field. I'm traveling. I still got my Pandora stores. And then we've got Alicia holding down the fort. as she's learning and training and, figuring things out. So I received a postcard in the mail that says, oh, Service Nation Alliance, they're going to be down in Portland, Oregon. So I'm like, well, close enough. So jumped in my car and drove down to Portland and went ahead and said, okay, what's this all about? And that's when I think a lot of my business turned, is when I started working with them, because then I could start understanding this business, how residential, how service contracts, install, like what? I can get paid the same day. I'm not waiting 60 days. It's not remodels. So that's kind of how my journey started. And we've done a lot of advancements to kind of take us where we're at today.
That's an awesome story. I love how you have broken it down just in the different parts. One of the things that I see in your story is the ability to see opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
You have a keen sense of seeing opportunity in different areas. So I'd like to maybe you could give some insight. How do you know when there's something good? Because from McDonald's to jewelry to HVAC and mechanical, the common theme that I see there is opportunity. And then one other thing that I see that I want to point out is the ability to can it, or to say, hey, this jewelry store is not working. But here's what I really like about what you did there is you had something in your contract that allowed you to get out. So I think there's a lot of value in that, and sharing that with other contractors. So one, how do you see opportunity? And do you have any insights to that? And then two, the opportunity to make sure that you're not staying in something that isn't working. Because many times business owners will, whether they started the company or they're in it or they're attached to it emotionally, they just stay in it and they run themselves into the ground. So those are two things that I think I'd love for you to just kind of give some thoughts on. What's been your success there and what can you share?
Sure. I think that's part of my DNA. I look for opportunities all the time. I am not a person that just will like sit down and say, oh, let me watch this TV show and relax. I'm like, okay, I'm doing something at the same time. And that's kind of my MO. And when I look for opportunity, sometimes it passes my way and I grab it. Other times I go seek it. So in the case of getting trained and updated and educated on HVAC, I worked with one company and I said, I really like them, and they're training me, but there's no follow-up. And in my case, I need some follow-up. I need somebody to say, hey, Lori, because I can look at those shiny things and go, oh, I want to do this, 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 and this, and it might not be the best for me. So then when I worked with Service Nation Alliance, I saw that as an opportunity. And then within that organization, I tried to grab more opportunities from people that were very good at what they do, like Western Heating and Air, the Snows, Angie and Ryan Snow, they're amazing. And so even Robin, when she was their office manager. So I gravitate towards people that I can work with, that train and help develop me, and I can pick up the phone and call. I've been doing a class it's called Clark Construction. It's an SPP, a special projects program. And Clark Construction, not only are they a global company, but they really understand that if they take women, minorities, disadvantaged companies, not only can they help train and develop them, they have a list of contractors they can go to. This one comes to me on like Facebook, and I'm like, oh, well, this kind of sounds interesting. So I fill it out, and like 3 weeks later, you've been hand selected. I'm like, oh no. And so I'm like, okay, I've been hand selected. Well, what does that mean? That means 8 months of every Monday evening from 5 to 8 p.m., a lunch and learn once a month. And I will tell you, we're winding down. We're on 7 months. And it's almost like an MBA in construction. And at my age, I'm like, I'm going back to school. Like this is a challenge for me. So the one thing that you will hear is that I can delegate very well. And the minute this program allowed me to take somebody from my office, the first thing I said was, well, Alicia, do you want to do it? So she's such a right-hand person to me. I will consult with her before I make some of my decisions. And I'm like, how is this going to impact you? Do you want to do this? So, and she's like about half my age. So she's like, yes, let's do it. I'm like, well, great. Because then if I can't understand something or do something, I have this young, talented person that she can get me through it. So we jumped on that opportunity. The opportunity at the end game of this is the fact we can present our company for commercial gas piping. And on this opportunity, they take the students that have completed this course, and they have already returned like over $1 billion in contracts to 1,250 folks. So I'm sitting there going, okay, what can be my piece of the action? So when I get on and they have different management folks from Clark and different folks that work with this group, and they say, you know, what is it you do? I don't get on there and say, well, I do residential HVAC, because that doesn't do me any good within that environment. I start out with, we have a commercial gas piping division. We do underground up to 4-inch. We travel anywhere. So it's kind of changing a little bit of that scenario. So when I say I look for opportunities.
We'll be right back to the show. I want to invite you to my Blue Collar Mastermind group. This is a group of blue-collar business owners who share input on tough topics, support, celebrate, and learn from each other. The world's best business owners, leaders, actors, athletes, and musicians all have coaches or are part of a similar group to grow and succeed. If you want more from your business, have limited time, don't want to break the bank, this group is for you. Learn more and apply to the group at bluecollarbusinesscoach.net.
When I say I look for opportunities, I look for it, then I try to weigh, is this a good one or not? When I pulled out of that Boise location on that Pandora Jewelry store, I literally worked it, and I probably worked it too long. I mean, and I'm relentless. In fact, I've had people tell me, you are relentless, you do not give up, and I don't. So I would spend 11% of my advertising budget, you know, like on a jewelry store. We went out to, I mean, the Boise football team, they are so famous for their blue field, and we connected with their football coach, and they had a new coach because of course the other one went to Seattle. So we connected with the new coach, and we ended up doing a football camp 101, and we were able to make beautiful photography of our jewelry. We set up a booth. We talked about coming into our, you know, Pandora Jewelry store inside the mall. At the same time, all these women are learning football 101. And so that's called getting an opportunity. And then we really drove it. We ended up probably doing, you know, $12,000, $15,000 in sales. So that's another way to do it. What I'm looking at now is opportunities. We're doing a lot of gas piping. So one of the things is we're working out of state. And so it causes some challenges, but at the end of it, we will have some extremely large contracts. And if I can add another $2 million to my sales just by gas piping, we're going to figure out what's going to work. So we mobilize. We get a fifth wheel, which I'm like, why did I buy a fifth wheel? I don't go, I love to camp, but I'm at the Westin 5-star. Now I own a fifth wheel. It's called Road Warrior. And so why do we do that? Well, the opportunity is because we can park it by where these jobs are and save ourselves a ton of money, you know, in housing and things like that. So, you know, that I look for opportunities in everything we do. And the second part, oh, go ahead. I was going to say the second part of the question is, when I decided to, you know, stop my Pandora store, and again, I had gone up to the president of Pandora. I had one-on-one meetings. when the president said you should close it, I'm like, oh my God, it's like no one's helping me out. So I'm doing the same thing now in my business currently. We are on ferries and we're expending enormous amounts of payroll and gas. And, I can have a $3,000 to $4,000 a month ferry bill. So where these other HVAC contractors are like, hey, I added another $4,000 to my bottom line. Mine's going to Washington State Ferries because we are not always making up that money in some of our bidding. So we decided we're going to dial back on some of the Seattle work, maybe only large projects. We've got some townhouses that are coming, but just going in for an install, a service appointment. So, we're already looking at that. Can we do fireplaces? Absolutely. Do we make money on doing fireplaces? Only if we sell them an insert, but to go in and fix it. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. I'm like, oh, I have to become more profitable.
One of the things I love about your story and where you are is a lot of business owners struggle because they started in the trade. They still work in the trade and they can't switch from the worker to the business owner.
Yeah.
So your approach of how you came in you are the business owner and you do that. So what tips could you give to somebody that maybe was in the HVAC since their, grandfather or dad, or maybe they started it, but they're just struggling to get to that business owner and they're just kind of stuck in the worker mindset? What advice would you give to them, or how do you get out of that?
It's tough because I like to say it's like Chuck in a truck. There's Chuck driving the truck and, hey, just pay me the cash and I'll do this install. But what ends up happening is they're not working on their business, they're working in their business. And you hear that phrase all the time. Bull, it's so true. In my case, I work on my business all the time and I still work in it. And when I first started out, I'm in there installing a hot water tank and I can run gas piping. And if somebody calls, I'm lifting the, the mini split and I'm running the line sets. And I'm doing that because I have to understand. So when my technicians say to me, oh my gosh, like this morning, we're talking about like change orders. Our guys, I call it giving up the warehouse, because what they want to do is the customer says, well, hey, will you run this inside of the walls instead of outside of the walls? Oh, heck no, because how much more money is that? And, using software and things like that. So I have to understand that so they can tell me, or I can dive deep to figure out, why don't we make money on this job? But I think what happens is everybody gets caught up in the day-to-day and they're like, oh my gosh, I have to turn the tools. And so the very first thing is you need to get yourself, like I had a right-hand person. So she stayed in our Port Ludlow office and I would be either in Boise or Salt Lake. And there was that connection. So she could go ahead, she could self-educate in an environment. I was paying her to do it when I needed something done. And I think when guys are out there in the field, they have got to get an apprentice. They need, and I shouldn't say guys because it's women too, because we have so many women in the trades, but they need to have someone that they can start transferring that to, because if they can't pull back, they can't grow their business. It's like nearly impossible. And one of the things too is like my background is on this call is women in HVACR. So I'm on the board for that. And when I wrap up today, we have an ambassadors meeting. And a lot of that meeting today is how can we get out into trade schools, get out into our community and spread the word that we not only want more women in the trades, just trades in general. So if you've got an individual that they can't get out of their business, they need to have a source of folks that they can go to and try to start apprenticeships and getting people trained, because it's not always just, hey, let me pay you a big dollar to come work for me. That's not always going to work.
Yeah, that's very valuable advice. Big big challenge. It's a real big challenge, but I liked how you said, find an apprentice, find somebody that they can go with you and just learn, because every time you pick up those tools to go out there, you're really costing yourself more than you're getting ahead. There's a huge cost to that, even though our mind tells us we're actually advancing it, we're doing it quicker. That's one of those myths that just definitely needs to be busted. So great advice there. Having seen a lot of different businesses, from the corporate McDonald's to, jewelry and all of that, what would you say is the same and what is different? Because people in construction service businesses might be saying, what can I learn from an organization? Because you have great insight to how they operate. I mean, 30 years with McDonald's. What can they take away, or what knowledge would you pass to them from corporate to there? What's the same and what's different?
So the number one thing, and whether it's the E-Myth or the E-Myth for contractors, Michael Gerber, in fact, I have to tell this because he was at one of our events and he had a book signing. And so on one of my business cards, I said, if you ever want to learn about the story of McDonald's, contact me. So sure enough, he contacted me. They set up an interview and he interviewed me. And the funniest thing he said to me is, he goes, well, when I write a book, it's about people that do one thing well. And he said, you're all over the board. And I go, I know. Like, I'm thinking that's a good trait to have, not a good trait. So it's like, well, if you figure out that one thing, he goes, you come back to me and I'll write a book with you. And I'm like, well, that's great, but I can never think of just one thing that I'm good at. But it's the type of thing where it's policies, it's procedures, it's repetition. And I see that. And those are some of the things I'm trying to put into my own company. And you would think, because I've spent so many years in McDonald's, that I would have that nailed. And I don't, because the reason why I don't necessarily have it nailed, and I know my vision, I know how I want to get there, but I'm of course, like everyone, I've got a little bit of a struggle along the way. So what it is, we don't sell all the same equipment. So for example, if we only sold one type of furnace, ducted furnace, or let's just say it's ductless. So we only sell Mitsubishi. And what we can do is we can work with that equipment and always have it staged and set up and ordered and in the warehouse. And someone calls and I need a 2-head system, I need a 3-head, whatever the case may be. And it's standardized. So that's part of it. How do you standardize? How do you set up a lot of your equipment and tools that you have kits, and it's the same thing? Because what happens then, it's easier for your employees to go out and say, oh, well, I know my expectations on this job. I have a checklist. There's been a job walk. I have a checklist. I have all the equipment I need. I go out to the job. I know my standard of where to park my car. When I talk to the customer, if it's a service call, do I, put on my booties, walk in, go to the thermostat? I mean, what's those standard policies, procedures that can make it more successful for your employees? Because we have some independent thinkers, and then we also have employees that they just want to go out, and I call it the technician mentality. They just want to go do the work. They just want to figure it out. They want to do a diagnostic. They want to fix it. They want to install it. It looks beautiful. They want to have pride in their work. They might not always have their truck stocked the way it should be. So I think that's probably the best advice that I've taken. It's the policies, it's the procedures. And it's amazing to me the number of folks that have a hard time managing, especially when it comes to conflict. And so I always like to say I don't run from conflict. I'm usually the one that stands there. But that's not only my personality, that's kind of when I have my DISC profile, which I think a lot of your folks are familiar with DISC. I'm like 99.9 on the D side. So that kind of tells you exactly, how I try to do things, which is not always the best way, because I have to look at everybody's profile and, work with them. But I think that's the other thing. It's having that strong management development. And I'm trying to get to that level in my company right now. I don't have a good level of, that mid-management that can run departments. And so again, it's work in progress, but those would be the two things, policies, procedures, standardized things, and then it's the whole management portion of the the follow-up and those type of things.
Those are great points. I think when you look at that, is there a right time to do that? Because sometimes people start and it might be too overwhelming in the beginning, but if you're really trying to scale, do you have any thoughts of maybe when? I mean, does it get more complicated or advanced as you go? Or if somebody has a business, when do they kind of know that they really need that? Is it from day one open? Or is it, is it a gradual process in your opinion?
So I think if you have the technical skills, you can scale quicker because you have the ability to lead your team a little bit stronger, because you'll know exactly this is what you need on an install, this is what you'll need on a service call. Where me, I'm like, well, I don't know. I have to rely on people. I have to figure it out. If it's not working, I have to get some advice. I need to change it up. So that's one way. And I know there have been some guys that have been, whether technicians or operations managers, and they've worked in larger companies and they've gone and they've started their own company. I think they scale pretty quickly. And then hopefully they continue to scale. In my case, I'm scaling slower because I'm doing not just the HVAC side of the business. So I'm going to scale really quickly with gas piping, because that is the one thing that is, it's a pretty good sure bet that I can work with that. And we know there's some big dollars coming that way. But with the HVAC, it's taking me longer to scale. But I think the other thing too is you look at your areas. So you'll know when it's time, if you have to open up like a satellite office, or you have that ability to do that. So we're working in 2 different counties now. And the third county, if I could get the right, say, manager, right technicians, I'd be able to scale very quickly because it's a much larger demographic area. So right now, capacity is holding me back. So it's not like there's ever a right time. I think you need to get in, you need to understand, know the business. And then the other thing is you need to make it profitable, because before you can scale, you've got to have the capital to do it. Like I've just been buying trucks when I can get them and adding to the fleet. And like I said, I bought this 5th wheel because, it's you can't buy it in your company name, because they're like, yeah, right, you're going to have a 5th wheel. So it's got to be in my name. So, how quickly I can scale based on my reserves, my capital, those type of things.
Yeah, one of the biggest things, just to kind of pull some of this together that I'm hearing that I think are excellent takeaways, is the idea of just knowing the difference between the business owner and the worker. Because what I'm hearing a lot is, business owners don't think about the cash that it takes to grow, but every business owner says, I want to grow, I want to scale. And I think what they miss a lot of times is what's on the back end. It burns cash when you got to grow, and it takes other challenges, and really that has to be, I'm a big proponent of mapping. I always talk about that in a lot of different things that I do, but you really have to understand the impacts of this growth, because if you run out of money, you're really going to go back the other way. And it really takes good financials. So knowing your numbers, you said, are you profitable? So important for businesses to know. So one thing that I'm hearing you say is you got to know and be the business owner. And I think that's so helpful for people that are the worker, to challenge them to be the business owner like you are. And I think that's so, so strong. The other thing that I hear you say with the McDonald's background is I don't think people in the service business and construction spend enough time on the processes and really getting that system in place. It's kind of overlooked, but if you're really looking to grow and scale, maybe it's not available in the first when you first start, because it's tough. Business is tough. But how do you implement policies and procedures to empower, enable your staff? Because we know we can't do it alone. But those managers, or if anybody comes into our company, they need to know this is the protocol. Here's where we park. Here's what we install. Here's the system. So I just think that's phenomenal advice. I think it's what people need to hear as a business owner and in construction. I mean, terrific. A couple quick fire, questions just to wrap up. First thing that you think of when I ask, the construction industry would be better if.
You had more women in the trades.
I love that. I think that's a really powerful one. And I think that needs to be said and continue to be worked on. I love seeing you being in the trades. It's inspiring to me. So thank you for leading the charge in that, especially with your organizations. It's really powerful. I can build blank in my sleep.
Ooh. I don't know that I can quick fire that one. I like to say I can build businesses in my sleep, just because I've had probably 6 different companies. Now, what I would like to say is I can build profit in my sleep, but I'm not there yet.
I like that one. Those are both good. I get sometimes it's spreadsheet, sometimes it's a house. You never know. So
yeah.
Biggest challenge.
Staffing capacity right now, getting the right people that we can build and give them long-term careers and stay excited about this industry, because there's a lot of work. I'm fortunate enough to be on some different boards. One of the boards I'm on is Habitat for Humanity. So, I've got a strong sense of giving back to my community. So Women in HVACR board, Builders Association board, Habitat for Humanity. And I went out on a woman's build and I did roofing, and it wasn't, oh, let's do a photo op. I mean, I was like wheeling those sheets of plywood and putting in the nails. And I came home and I said, I will never roof again. And I sat on my couch and I don't think I moved for about 6 hours. So I have such an appreciation for guys that roof and gals who roof, because I can't do it. I was just, and maybe because I'm old, I cannot do this.
That's awesome. Biggest skill.
Probably mentorship. I like to share a lot of not only my journey, but what I've learned. And I would say I never hold my cards so close to the vest. I share. So I'm very transparent, very direct. The D in me comes out a lot. I'm very direct, and but I like to share my knowledge and help people along the way.
I love that, because it's really about building impact and passing that on. There's not a better feeling when you can help somebody and they take it and run with it. Something that somebody taught you and you can pass it on. It really is inspiring. Cabin or beach house?
Well, I live on the water, so I'm going to say cabin.
Awesome. Favorite brand of equipment?
Ooh. In my industry, probably Mitsubishi.
I want other business owners in construction or service businesses to know what?
That this is a phenomenal business. And I mean, COVID taught us one thing: we're essential workers. And if you are not successful in your business, you need to reach out and get some help, because there is no reason why you cannot be so successful within this industry. And I think people will start struggling because they're not sure who they can turn to. And so there is such a resource of, people out there that can help. And I think that, that's the biggest thing. So amazing industry.
Lois, thank you so much for being on the show and sharing your journey and your knowledge. It's inspiring, and I know that this can help people. Great stuff. Thanks for being on the show.
You bet. Thanks for your time today. I appreciate it.
Hey, it's Seth. Thanks for listening. For more information about my Blue Collar Mastermind Group, Blue Collar Gear, free resources, or my book, go to bluecollarbusinesscoach.net. You can subscribe, like, and share if you enjoy this.